Now we're going to come to start to answer how we can seek this knowledge. And we're going to say that learning or getting knowledge is built upon two pillars. You have to have both of them. Okay? So it's built upon two pillars. You have to have both of them. And they are al-hifdhu wal-fahm. Memorization and understanding. So what happens if you have memorization but you don't have understanding? You become like the donkey that carries books. And mashallah, you can carry, 100 books. But you try asking the donkey what any of those books mean, and he doesn't know anything. So the one who memorizes but doesn't understand, this person is not praiseworthy. And the one who understands and doesn't memorize, this person is also deficient. Because when you ask them for a proof, they don't remember it. And when it comes to something they have to say, they don't remember to say it because they haven't memorized all the things that they need to say at the right times. And ultimately, they don't carry that knowledge with them. They're like a person who is knowledgeable when their library is in their reach, but when their library is out of their reach, they don't have any knowledge. Rather, you should carry your knowledge in your heart as much as possible. You should try to carry as much knowledge as possible in your heart, because that's when you really use it. You don't really use your knowledge when you're sat with a library in front of you and you have all your books laid out, or you have your computer, you have your search engines in front of you and you can search the answer. It's not the same as the person who, wherever they are in the world, that knowledge goes with them in their heart. And nobody does that perfectly, except for the Prophets ﷺ. Nobody gathers all of the knowledge of Islam in their heart. But all you can do is to try to increase the amount that you hold in your heart. And generally, it's really important we see this, that we see that, or we emphasize this, that a lot of adults, the problem is that they don't give importance to memorization. They want to learn, but they don't want to memorize. Because in our eyes, memorization is what you do when you are 7 years old and 10 years old and 12 years old, and then maybe your GCSE time, you're 16 or whatever, 17, and then that's the time when you memorize. But 40 years old you can memorize, 50 years old, 60 years old you can memorize. Yes, you can memorize. But is your memorization going to be the same as an 8 or 9-year-old? No. And is the understanding of an 8 or a 9-year-old going to be the same as an understanding of someone who is 40 or 50 years old? No. So what does that tell you? There's a sliding scale. When people are younger, like young children, we give more emphasis to memorization. And then as they get older, we turn up the volume on the understanding. And we give them a little bit more understanding every time. And as a person gets older, and by older I don't mean old as in necessarily 80 or whatever years old, or 70 years old, or whatever. And even when a person becomes an adult and gets older into their 20s and their 30s and their 40s and so on, again the same thing happens but in reverse. We ask a little bit less memorization from them because they have less ability to memorize, and we require more understanding from them than we do from the small children. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But the same two things have to be there. Doesn't matter if you are 9 years old or you're 90 years old. There has to be memorization and there has to be understanding. If your knowledge program is based purely upon understanding and it doesn't have a memorization component, it will not help. Likewise, our children, many of them, what do? We put them in tahfidh. They memorize the Quran. But we see them at 16, 17, we say, what happened to my kids? Allahul Musta'an, my kids have gone astray. Because as you saw, it was just memorization, 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 and there was no component for understanding. Those two have to both be there. There has to be memorization and there has to be understanding, but we adjust them according to the ability of the person. So memorization. First question, what should you be memorizing? There is no doubt and there's no disagreement among any of the scholars that the single most important thing to memorize is the Book of Allah. There's no scholar had ever disagreed on this issue. At the same time, especially with people who are older, it is also important at the same time to memorize certain other things, because as we get older, we don't have the luxury of time. We don't have the luxury to say, okay, you're 6 years old, until you're 10 years old, just memorize Quran and don't do anything else. Because they have the luxury of time before they reach puberty, before certain things become obligatory. So we may have to break the rules a little bit as we get older. But definitely our first place should be to memorize the Quran. And along with the Quran, but in less, like a smaller amount, so that it doesn't crowd the Quran, but we still have to learn it, is to learn the Hadith and the Sunnah. And again, a big problem we have in the world today, a lot of Muslims memorize Quran, but they maybe haven't even memorized one Hadith, or even maybe not even 10 Hadith. So memorize the Sunnah. Step by step, bit by bit. We're not going to start you on Bukhari and Muslim. We're going to start you on a small text. Okay? And we should also memorize essential texts. You can call these like primers. Sometimes you call them primers or keys. You know, sort of pieces of information or books or poetry or whatever that basically provides us with lots of answers in a small space. So you're not going to memorize a book which is 50 volumes. Because memorizing a book that's 50 volumes would be counterproductive, right? You want to memorize a book that is 5 pages or 6 pages, but those 5, 6 pages are like symbols and keys that open up for you those 50 volumes, so that it keeps it in your mind and it keeps it in your memory, and you have the ability to go forward and to be able to kind of keep things in your mind. So 3 things in Islam that we have to memorize: the Quran and the Sunnah, and what we call al-mutun al-ilmiyah, primer texts, basic small pieces of information, might be 3 pages, 5 pages, 50 pages, you know, not a huge amount, but it gives you lots of information in that small space. It could be in poetry form, it could be in prose, like it could be like a book, or it could be like a poem, but something that gives you, you know, everything in a short space. Okay?